Hello, we're rolling into another episode of the DRH show. As usual, I talk to interesting people within psychology, mental health, and well-being. Today, I'm joined by a campaigner who has a powerful story to share on how mental health issues impacted his life and of his family. Mark Ruff, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
It's lovely to have you here, Mark. I know you really have an interesting story on how mental health has affected your family and your life. But if you could just firstly paint us a picture of your backstory, what was your childhood like?
Okay. I came from what I would consider to be a very good childhood. For the most part, it was stable. Growing up, I'm the youngest of 5 children. And my parents were able to stay together from their marriage all the way through my father's passing, unfortunately, when I was younger. So I was able to see the dynamics of a marriage and raising 5 children and the challenges that go with that. Now I have the benefit of looking back at my childhood experience and seeing how a series of events allowed mental illness to rear its ugly head and do some unbelievable damage to my family, to the people that I love, and the family that I grew up in, and I feel so connected to.
Now, you just briefly mentioned something about mental illness, and this is, of course, the reason why I invited you here. Could you just share to us, if you can, how it all started and the history of mental illness within your family?
Now, understanding as an adult, back at my family's situation and the telltale signs. Yes, my mother has been diagnosed with 4 different mental illnesses by mental health professionals. That's undisputed. That's the fact. But looking back at my experiences with my grandfather, with my aunt, and my 2 uncles on my mother's side, I recognize that mental illness does run in the family, and it manifests itself a little bit differently with the different siblings that grow up in a household. However, the life experiences can draw out some of the worst and some of the best. It just depends. And so those details matter in different phases of life. So for example, my mother's been diagnosed with somatoform disorder, atypical depression, bipolar disorder, and borderline personality disorder. And it was, for the most part, kept in check by the stability that my father provided. He was such a stabilizing force. He was very much the rock of our family, a strong patriarch. And so when he passed away, it meant that things could really spiral out of control, and the guardrails were no longer on. The training wheels came off. The way that I describe it to people is if you have a 3-legged stool that's standing there and you kick one of the legs out, the other 2 legs can't support it stabilized. So it's going to fall one way or the other. You're not sure which way, but it's going to fall over. So that is actually what happened with respect to my mother. So.
And growing up, did you recognize this as a child, or is this something that developed over time? You mentioned that it's a good analogy that you said that, it's a 3-legged stool, but did you notice it growing up, how your mom tried to cope?
I did. I knew that my mother's personality was much more volatile than the other mothers that I knew of. When I would go to a friend's house and spend time there, if there was an issue and the parent wanted the kid to do something, it was handled in a much more calm manner. In our household, with respect to my mother's emotions, you could go from the hero to the villain, back to the hero, back to the villain, back to the hero in one sentence, in the process of one exchange, a one-way exchange from my mother. And now I can look back and go, okay, that's a sign that if things can be so extreme, so close together, that means that the normal, whether it chemical imbalance, or the normal things that moderate someone's emotions, even just throughout a day. That's when I learned as a kid that things are different with mom than they are with.
Now, let's talk about the impact of your father's death to your mom's mental health and well-being. Of course, needless to say that, you know, whether you've got mental health issue, you know, death of a loved one would really impact you. But let's try to, you know, explore more about how it has impacted your mom.
Well, I think it would be a challenge for anyone, losing a spouse. That's something that I can't fully wrap my mind around, and nor do I ever want to experience. So my heart goes out to anyone who loses a spouse, that life companion. But something that the mental health community should consider, and maybe it does with counseling and those kinds of things, but for a human being that spends decades with another human being as the life partner, the best friend, the confidant, when that gets removed, the stabilizing force is removed, the bouncing ideas off of someone, the point counterpoint, the honest, simple, even minor debates. They don't have to be heated debates about the most important things. It can be very minor stuff, but still, just having someone challenge you a little bit, having someone calm you down and say, hey, let's just take a breather and let's revisit that in a minute. Just all those stabilizing forces were gone. And so I could tell that my mother was starting to live in her own mental world with no one challenging her, with no one questioning, no one saying, do you think that's a proportionate response, or any of just the natural things that, you know, bouncing ideas off of each other is a term that we use here in the States, where you just, if someone is your partner for life, the stability that's provided by that. So for those in our community that have mental illnesses and know about it, they know that that's a challenge they have to overcome on a daily basis throughout their life. Well, if they have a spouse that's diagnosed with terminal illness, they need to probably get into counseling, but right away, and start thinking about what they can do to mitigate those problems so that they don't do damage to their own relationships that they do value. So on one level, they value a relationship. On another level, they can't help themselves but destroy it when the stabilizing force is taken away. And that's got to be a very cruel prison for someone to be in.
And of course, death is a fact of life. It's a reality. You know, spouses, they die, our parents die. But it's different for you because you kind of know that you mentioned earlier that your dad has a terminal illness, so you're kind of expecting that he would soon pass away. But what would you say is an effective way of coping with grief and bereavement?
That's tough to say. I think individuals approach things differently. I know for myself, I'm an extrovert, so I would emote using words. I would write things down. I would share experiences with close friends. I had the benefit growing up of having mentors, of knowing that my father was running out of time. And so I had some friends that my father was not in the aviation business in any way. I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so I had the opportunity of seeking out and finding mentors that were in advanced places in their careers. I go, man, maybe I want to go there someday, and maybe I want to serve my country and fly in the United States Air Force. Well, I befriended and found mentors that took an interest in my future. I said, I want to fly for an airline someday, be an airline pilot. I found some friends that had kids of their own, but in some ways they kind of adopted me as someone that was, someone that might've been friends with their son at school or daughter, but they knew that I had an interest, and they took an interest in my success. And so those are the ways that I coped and confronted with the father figure that was going to have to leave too early. That was going to be gone too soon. And I never got to see my father with gray hair. He never got to see me graduate from high school or anything like that. But the time that I had with him was precious, because he was able to impart the energy on me that he wanted, of pursue your dreams, live the best life you can, be a good person, the rest will sort itself out. Some lessons I carry with me the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
But then I have siblings. For example, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. So the other 4 are very different personalities. So we have an introvert, and he dealt with things differently. A very introspective view of things. It really emboldened and strengthened his faith in God, his faith as a Christian. While for some of the others of us, it made us question and challenge that. So, different personalities can handle an experience, a shocking experience like that shakes you to the core. That's when how we're wired, which ties directly into mental health, mental illness, all that. How we're wired is how we respond and cope in our own internal mechanisms, whether it's nature or nurture. I can't tell you whether it's simply a genetic combination or whether it's a learned behavior of coping, but I'm sure that the professionals in mental health could probably explain it way better than I can. I just can see the differences, but I also see the values, the pros and cons of the different ways of coping.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mark, you mentioned something about your siblings. You've got different personalities. Of course, it's expected of any siblings. But it just reminds me that aside from your mom, also one of your siblings has been diagnosed with mental health issues. So if you could just talk to us about that.
Well, I think what you're referring to is my brother Matt, my middle brother. And he had always gotten into trouble. He had always acted out. He had always had these things that you think, oh, maybe this is just a kid. They're just testing the boundaries. They're just exploring the rules and what can be done and what can't. But then it would be theft and stealing. And then it was kiting checks from my mother and stealing from my mother as an adult. And then one day when I was in Air Force pilot training, based in Oklahoma here in the United States, that's when I got a phone call. And the Federal Bureau of Investigation here in the United States and the local police department had showed up to my mother's house, where my brother Matt, who's older than me, was living at the time. And they had a search warrant to seize computer hard drives and anything in the home. And that process unraveled my brother Matt going to prison here in the United States for 7 years for felony possession of child pornography. And that was another terrible experience inside my family of, I don't know what you want to call pedophilia, whether it's mental health issue, mental illness, whether it's just criminal. I mean, it depends on how anyone wants to look at it. Different countries have different laws. However, I'll never forget the experience of one of my sisters calling me, crying uncontrollably and trying to explain to me what had happened. And that's when I recognized that my brother's mental issues were manifested in the child pornography pedophilia aspect and law enforcement getting involved and how it's going to change his life forever. And it just, that's a tough phone call to get. I was driving my car and you're just at a loss for words. Someone that you love, that you grew up with, that you want the best for, can't get out of their own way. And you know that something's not right with them. You know what their understanding of right and wrong, whether it's being a sociopath, whether it's being, again, I don't, with respect to those terms, I'd have to look them up and review them before I fully can grasp what is the most appropriate. But seeing that, and it's almost like you can draw a direct line from my grandfather on my mom's side to my mom, to my brother Matt, and it carries through the generations. And there's something that's not computing properly. They don't want to follow the rules. For example, one of the things that's the toughest aspect of the struggles with my family right now is that from my mom, I can tell the rules don't apply to her. They just, in her mind, they just don't. The laws of the United States just don't apply. the facts don't apply. If she wants to believe that the Federal Bureau of Investigation planted child pornography on my brother Matt's computer, that's absurd. That's not a real thing. She wants to believe that my other brother Mike planted it. She'll testify under oath in court proceedings that that's what happened, when there's no evidence and it doesn't make any sense. But that's someone needing to cope with things in a way that the rest of us would just accept reality. But she has chosen to create her alternate reality, and that's how things can really get twisted around. And once again, without my father there or anyone there that's a stabilizing force in her life, a spouse, someone who's intimately close to someone who can challenge them and say, well, does that really make sense? Or, if your child is troubled like my brother Matt is, and gets in trouble with the law and goes to prison for 7 years, that doesn't make you a bad parent. That doesn't make you a bad person for raising that kid. You can still love that child. None of that's wrong. You don't have to create an alternate reality where this person's perfect and the whole system's wrong. But that's the nature of mental illness.
Yeah, that's really a very challenging situation to be in. You already have a mother who's already suffering with her own mental health issues, and then you've also had your brother Matt, who's also dealing with some issues. Now, from my understanding, Mark, is that your mother has also been exploited due to her mental illness. If you could just talk to us about the nature of how she was exploited.
She has. So in the United States, the way that our system works, if there's a dispute between people, we file a lawsuit and it would go to the court system in the civil courts, and it would tries to get sorted out through a judge, a jury, or in some cases, arbitrators. So essentially lawyers that come in and act like a part jury, part judge, and then make a recommendation. Well, what that means is that unlike in the UK and some of the other European countries where if someone files a lawsuit, takes a civil dispute, and they want to take it to court and file claims, as it gets adjudicated and sorted out, the loser has to pay the court fees and the legal fees, and so that discourages frivolous lawsuits. Lawsuits that are completely unfounded with no evidence. Well, in the United States, unfortunately, we have not learned yet of the better way to do things. So what that means is there is a multi-billion-dollar industry of very talented, smart people, lawyers, plaintiffs, attorneys, that can scout out cases to take on, usually for free, contingency, and go sue people and make trouble to get paid, right? Well, unfortunately, my mother, with her mental illness, combined with, she feels, if you look up borderline personality disorder, you'll see one of the top things is fear of abandonment. Well, my mother has fear of abandonment, and she has aligned herself with my brother Matt, the convicted felon, child pornographer one, and filed claims against her other 4 children, the 4 what I would consider to be the good kids. A local media station here in Dallas referred to us as the 4 non-sex offender children. And these lawyers, towards the end of their career, needed money, desperate. One of them has bad tax levies with the Internal Revenue Service here, the IRS in the United States, so to the tune of about $300,000, and had been sued by a bank here for defaulting on a $500,000 loan. And so teams up with my mentally ill mother and my convicted felon pedophile brother Matt to file frivolous claims against the 4 other children to try and go extort money from us. And it has been a decade-long terrible saga and drama. And it brings us to this day where my family has been split apart by people who are opportunists, seeking to enrich themselves on the destruction that mental illness can do. And in the United States, in the state of Texas in particular, as far as mental illness goes, the court system basically sees it as you are allowed to legally be as crazy as you want to be. And I think those are the terms I've been told. So it's until you become a physical threat to yourself or others, the courts aren't interested in getting involved. So in other words, someone can be hell-bent with the worst motivations, can still be somewhat of a functioning person in society, and can go down to a courthouse and file crazy frivolous claims, and the other people have to show up and spend money to defend themselves. And it's one of the serious flaws in our system that we need to improve in the United States. And that's one of the reasons why my family and I started our website, why we had cherished our privacy for so long. But the newspaper here in Dallas, the Dallas Morning News, had heard about my family's court situation and wrote an article, a front page article about it. And that's when I recognized that my privacy's gone. It's gone forever. But at least I can take my deeply painful experience and try and turn it into something good. And just like any movement, it takes time. It builds. But there's a need for it. In the United States, one of the things that makes me so excited about what's happening in the world, really, is the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States, the Me Too movement. I can go on Netflix and I can watch a documentary about Jeffrey Epstein, about Harvey Weinstein. There are TV shows like Dirty Money that expose banks that are doing terrible things. And we're entering a new era of accountability, and I love it. There had always been police brutality in the United States, particularly from police organizations with people of color, right? So if you are Black or brown in the United States, you have a different experience with law enforcement than people that are white or privileged, right? Well, that is slowly starting to change because of accountability, because of body cams, because of the proliferation of cell phone videos and cameras. And that is such a good thing that now it's the wealthy, privileged, white elite in the United States that is recognizing, wait a minute here, maybe this isn't all made up. Maybe there really is a problem between law enforcement and people of color in the United States. Maybe we aren't treated the same. And that's how change happens. That's how we make progress. And so that makes me so excited. Well, we're not limited to just doing one or two things at a time. We can improve so many different things. So in the United States, are changing the way that our civil legal system handles and interacts with people that are mentally ill, that are stressed, that are under unbelievable stressors is really important. And same with the law enforcement side. I mean, many times individuals that are having a mental crisis are out in the street and their behavior is strange, and law enforcement gets called and the police show up, and with limited training, they don't know how to handle a situation where someone might be lashing out. And so all it takes is that person who's having that mental crisis to lunge at a law enforcement officer in the United States, and a gun gets drawn and they're shot and killed. And it didn't have to happen that way. Those chain of events didn't have to. If we can interrupt that sequence, we can save a life. We can get someone the help they need. Well, that's what should happen in our civil courts. We need to interrupt the sequence of, if someone shows up with ridiculous claims that don't make sense with absolutely no evidence, we must have a mechanism that blows the whistle that says, hang on, this should go to a different body to be reviewed to decide whether it can proceed or not. There are many different aspects, but that's, our website, just fightforjustice.com. That's one of the things that we're trying to build.
You mentioned about that there's a need for change within the legal system in the US, but let's go back to your mom. Clearly she's in a mental health crisis, as you just explained earlier, but have you made any attempt, or have you reached out to try to help her?
I have a number of times. So has my sister Tracy. And every time we get a very ugly response from her main lawyer, the one that has stolen money from her to pay his back taxes and settle his bad bank debt. It's so bizarre to have a lawyer tell me that I'm not allowed to email my mother. That's not a legal thing. That doesn't make sense. but yet to have this angry, threatening, so I don't get a response from my mother, she forwards it to her lawyer, and then the lawyer emails me, my lawyer, my sister, her lawyer. I mean, it's an isolation. I would imagine if you were to write a book on how to exploit the elderly or the mentally ill, probably step one would be isolate them from the people that actually love them. In other words, you don't want them to have interaction with their children, with a spouse, with whomever. So my mother, she is about as isolated as it gets. And that's what's very scary is I don't know if she's taking the medications that she should be taking. I don't have any information. And she's turning 76 here in a few weeks. And I just don't know if there's an opportunity left in life to rebuild, to repair a relationship, to hug and forgive and do those things that are healthy for me, not just for her. And I don't know if there's enough sand left in the hourglass, if that makes sense, because as long as people like her main lawyer, Randall Mathis, as long as he's there to interrupt and to tell her, don't respond, forward it to me, I'll take care of it, don't worry about it. And it's so the forces are going to be my brother Matt, who lives with her. He's 41 years old, lives with her, needs her. There's a codependent thing going on there. And the lawyer who needs to control her and needs to keep getting money out of her and keep the fight going against her children. If there are many different ways this can go, but as long as she's isolated, I don't think she can even help herself.
Now, Mark, earlier you already mentioned that you have a website which actually covers the tragic story of your family, justfightforjustice.com. If you could just talk us more about your website. Did you create this with your brothers and sisters? And what's the ultimate aim of your website?
Yes, the ultimate aim is to raise awareness, to enact change, to impart energy. Our story is a small story in a small part of a small country in the bigger world. So I don't know if much is going to change for us individually, but over time, as awareness across the board is raised, again, a TV show like Dirty Money, they did an episode about elder exploitation in the courts and by the banks. Well, that is my family's story to a T. And when other people see something like that, send it to me and say, Mark, you got to see this. This is just like what your family's going through. That means that other people are aware. We're becoming more aware, and how our civil and criminal courts process through these people that prey on the elderly. The pressure does have to come from the outside. For example, the Jeffrey Epstein case, or the Harvey Weinstein case. What I've learned is that after the fact, you can look back and say, everybody knew about this for decades. And I'm going, what do you mean everybody knew about it? Oh yeah, law enforcement looked into it, but that's a wealthy, powerful person. So no one was interested in creating trouble that they didn't need. So the wealthy and the powerful, the law applies differently to them than the rest of us, just like with large banks or large corporations that are wealthy and influential and powerful. Well, the modern media can close that gap. And so us starting our website, I think, should help close the gap of, instead of suffering in silence, I think it's better to tell your story. For me, reading a newspaper article that has inaccuracies about my family and our experience was a very troubling thing. So it encouraged me to tell our story, which is what The Financial Murder of Mike Ruff, the documentary that I put on YouTube, that's what it's about. It's about telling our story. I don't expect much to change from my family and our experience. Eventually this will run its course, and it will be done, and we'll all find ways to move forward with our lives. But if it imparts a little bit of energy, if it allows me to someday rebuild the relationship with my mother or with my brother Matt or whatever, then some good will come from it. And so I would encourage others that are listening to this story and say, wow, I've experienced something like that. I know somebody who's experiencing something like that. Encourage them to to sit down for some interviews, to have, the other people around the experience, whether it's siblings or coworkers or whatever it might be, to sit down and record it. Have a documentarian, someone who, that's kind of my nature, is to record things for the future or whatever. I think it's a valuable experience for the individual telling their story. There's something cathartic about telling my story, but also it's important to get it out there to where people understand these things happen in our world, in our society every day. Mental illness is something that affects everyone. It can affect you in small ways. It can affect you in big ways, but it affects all of us. And we should always be thinking about our mental health and what we can do, what we can learn to make it better, whether it's something as simple as counseling or whether it's something much more like, diagnoses or medications or whatever might help. But that'll help us live in a better world with a better society. And again, my family's experience has been half in the civil court system and just half personally. But there are others where it's all been personal. There are others where it's all been in a court system. So I don't know, there's something to be learned for everyone. So the motivation to do the website was to get our story out there. And people can do what they want with it, judge what they want, disregard it, whatever. That's up to them. But if you have the truth that you're carrying around in your heart, you need to say it. It will make you a better person. I think that's so much of the challenges that we all confront in life is, who am I? What do I want? Where am I going? How do I get there? But also, who am I with? Who do I take with me? What are my values? What's important? How are we taking care of each other? It can be greeting that stranger with a smile, or it can be going out of your way to really help somebody who's in desperate need. But those are the kind of things we need to be doing.
Ultimately, just like what you've said, your website is out there, your story is out there. So it's just for, people to make what they want to make out of it. But what I want to ask you, Mark, is what's your message for those family who might be struggling with the same, situation? It might not be similar, but, struggling with mental illness within the family. What's your message?
Get help early. Get help early. Don't be afraid to raise the subject, to broach the subject, to have a discussion, to sit down, to take it seriously, to read books about it, to go online, to talk with other people who've confronted those kinds of things. No, there shouldn't be any taboo. There shouldn't be any type of anxiety about even addressing the issue. And I will tell you, from my childhood till now, our society's ability to discuss different mental illnesses, and even you don't have to describe it as mental illness. You can just also describe it as, people that are just struggling internally with some issues that, stressors, things that can be temporarily involved in your life, and then they can go away, or they can be with you because that's the way you're wired. But I think people are being introspective with a more open mind than they've ever been. And that is progress. That is a good thing.
Just like what you said, it's better if you can talk about mental health and also, get to learn the stories similar with your family and how mental illness has affected your family. Now, it's been really a challenging situation for you and for your family, but I just want to ask something different because we're already nearing towards the end of the interview. And I always ask this to to the people that I talk to. So, Mark, of all this, the stressful and challenging situation that you've been into, how do you relax? What's your distressing outlet?
Well, it totally depends. Recently, I had an experience where, you kind of get in a rhythm in life. I was working and working and working, and I was working on family projects and work, family projects. I work 2 jobs. So I have 2 careers that kind of run in parallel. And so what that means is that either one of them will allow me to pour myself into that. There's always work to be done. I'll put it to you that way. And I decided to, with COVID happening and everything, I decided to take an opportunity to take a little bit of a pay cut, but to get more of my time back. And that is a decision I am so happy with. I sleep more, I feel better, I exercise more than I have in a while, and I made a decision to go get certified to fly another airplane that will allow me to to do some unique flying and some unique training, and build some fun videos, videos that I can post on the internet that are not about my terrible family situation, but are about the joy of flying. And so that right there, I was a little hesitant because it was going to take a lot of time and a lot of money. But I made the decision to go for it. And already just a month later, I can look back and say, absolutely, that was the right move. It reignited a passion inside me that I knew was there. I just hadn't fed it. I hadn't properly cared for that passion. I wasn't watering it. And so going out and getting checked out in that airplane, and it's an aerobatic airplane, so I can go do loops and rolls and all the fun stuff on a beautiful day that is the very best of flying. So what that did for my soul was such a good, healthy thing. Part of it just kind of knocked some rust off. Part of it was a challenge. I needed the challenge of, okay, I haven't gotten a type rating from the FAA in a while. I haven't had to study and read these books and understand these manuals and practice. And I was, not nervous, but I was, anytime you go fly with the Federal Aviation Administration here in the United States, it's a challenge. You're being watched, studied. Someone's taking notes on what you're doing and how you do it. And so you want to perform. You want to elevate your performance to the highest possible level. And that was such a good thing for me to do. And I look back now, and I mean, even when I'm talking about it, I can't stop smiling. And it means I get to then go share that with other people, some of my friends that have never been upside down in an airplane, have never, looked up and seen the ground. Those kinds of things that I want to share with them. And it takes a little time, takes a little bit of money, but it's worth it. It sure beats spending money on other stupid things. One of the lessons I learned from the passing of my father when I was a kid, I was 13 years old when he got sick. And I learned very rapidly that we don't know how much time we have on this planet. And so get busy doing the things that make you happy with the people that make you happy. And stuff doesn't matter. You don't get to take it with you when you go.
Exactly.
I see people that I come across in life that I recognize they're running up a tab. It's a score. They want more stuff and more things and the best things and the best stuff. And I want to explain to them, when you die with the most stuff, you didn't win. You didn't win. That's not what it's about. It's about people. It's about experiences. And so this was getting back to people and experiences. So I can share the experience. I can give the experience to people that wouldn't normally be able to have that experience. And that's what brings a lot of joy to me. So that's what makes me happy. And that's something I've focused on the last month and a half or so. And I'm really happy about it. That has helped my mental health.
Lovely message, Mark. And finally, what else is in the pipeline?
Well, we're going to keep working on videos. We're going to keep updating our website. My family's legal saga will continue moving forward. And as a family, we are in a very, very cool place. We're in, when I say that, I mean my two sisters, my brother Mike, and myself, and their spouses, and a really cool place. The better we're managing the stress and coping with the issues we've had to confront over the last decade. So that part gives me a lot of excitement about peace and joy moving forward. So.
Well, it's been an insightful conversation with you, Mark, but unfortunately our time is up. Thank you for sharing your time and the story of your family, and of course some lovely tips on how to handle our mental health and well-being. I look forward to hearing more about your website, and all the best.
Yes, and it's justfight4justice.com.
Okay, thank you, Mark.